Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China, and today I want to discuss a few of the replies that I've received regarding what's going on in the USA right now. So one thing I'll reiterate is that China isn't budging. The president of the US is. He's realized that there's a lot at stake and he's listened to some business leaders. I'm not sure what the percentage of electronic goods amounts to, nor the handheld phones or solar panels that he's suddenly exempted, in inverted commas, but it's absolutely certain that it amounts to quite a lot of trade that the US and China already do. However, there are some problems, not least of which is that although he's reduced the 145% tariff, he has not removed the 20% that was initially placed on all Chinese goods because of the fentanyl tax. Another thing is that production would have already started to wind down in the recent kerfuffle of who will tariff what and at what cost. Now that Trump has backed down on many Chinese items that he's just found out his country needs, and his CEOs will lose bonuses if they don't get, production will need to be ramped up. Furthermore, many products are currently stuck on US docks and on ships because importers are saying they can't afford to pay the additional tax to release them. Shipping from China has been dropping. It's almost zero for a few days, and there's a lot less to export from here as a result of these things. So even if orders start and products resume moving from here in China to the West, all these factors combined mean that in a couple of days, until things change, there are going to be shortages in the USA. The entire system works on a Japanese-inspired just-in-time method for deliveries. And right now, those deliveries aren't being met. And all this means that shortages, if they haven't already, will start in the US quite soon. Not only will there be shortages, those things that do make it into the US without or with tariffs aren't coming as fast. No one is going to send half a shipload halfway around the world, so manifests will need to be full. And with reduced quantities as well as less products, it means less ships, less often, and higher prices. And all of this is only if China actually agrees. Now, I know Chinese manufacturers want to, but perhaps the country will say, okay, but only if the invoices are paid in RMB. Or okay, but only a limited amount each month. Who knows how China will handle this backpedaling from Trump? I certainly don't, but as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already pointed out, this is the second backpedal by Trump. So it's clear the US administration are realizing their errors. Perhaps China won't react negatively and will let the US slide on this so they get it right in future. Perhaps China will put some conditions on it. We'll know soon because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the State Council Information Office will put out an announcement in the next day or two, probably before I'm even finished editing this video. And there's another fly in the ointment. Remember Trump said all Chinese-owned, operated or built ships must pay more? Well, he hasn't yet signed off on that, and it's probably another thing that he'll actually back down from, because his advisors must have clearly told him how mad that decision was. If it doesn't happen, are we going to see any headlines about that, or is it just another Trump threat that's confined to this very large Oval Office litter bin? Who knows? Now, because Trump blinked and removed so much from the list of tariffs, it might not be as bad as I or some economist expected and predicted, but it's still not going to be great. And one fantastic question that I got from McGonagle on YouTube was this. He asked me, could you talk about what a banana republic installation might look like? And Casper described himself as a very worried American. Now, honestly, I can't. I really don't know what it would look like. However, I do not see a civil war. I see a coup d'etat, which means some senior military, business and political leaders will tear up the Constitution, overthrow without war, and take over the White House. There will be an interim period of anarchy, that's inevitable, but most people wouldn't be badly affected by that, unless, of course, they are activists or participants and choose to become combatants, because the military would probably be called back to take control. Now, one thing that could happen is that the 25th Amendment could be enacted. But the truth is, if they were to do that, they'd need to put J.D. Vance in charge. And I'm sure the people who want to do that would be creating a situation that they're not willing to replace Trump with Vance. So a tearing up of the Constitution is the only way. That's revolutionary. Most Americans will hate this idea, but there is a positive side to it. I'm being completely hypothetical here. I'm not suggesting tearing up the Constitution. I'm not suggesting civil war or coup d'etat. I personally think the Constitution is outdated and unsuitable even for its time. And the very fact that there are now 27 amendments in all indicate it might be time to start again, make it right. If this were to happen, and an interim junta were to study China's method of democracy as it is today, then that would lead to a very good rebuilding of a great country. Democracy from grassroots level, corruption rooted out, people having a say in both day-to-day management of society and how the government manages them on a national level. I'm not optimistic that the people who want to remove Trump would be the kind of people who would implement such a grassroots democracy. So I don't think that will be happening anytime soon. Sorry about that, Americans. Another great question came from the very aptly named Not Sure 421. He or she said, Democrats are using China as the boogeyman to gaslight from their corruption as well. Not only Republicans, most US citizens are happy with their crumbling infrastructure, unaffordable health care, etc., because they are convinced they have freedom that the Chinese don't have. So they are told, he said. And he or she is correct to a point. And I assure you, this is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. It's a divisive tactic designed to erode cohesion, and the anti-China rhetoric is the one and only thing Americans can agree on. They're being conned by both sides of their government to think there's a problem that's bigger and more causal to the myriad of problems that the elites have. The elites milk money from the taxpayers to embezzle and enrich themselves through what they legislate into legal means. Now think about this. The USA has, over the last 10 years or so, probably more, seen the greatest transfer of wealth from ordinary Americans into the bank accounts of wealthy elites, mostly Americans, not all though, in history. Even the Romans weren't this bad with their bread and circuses. At least the plebs got to go to the circus. Another respondent, called Extreme Pacifist, great name, suggested we find and share links and stats about US imports and exports and all the people and their companies that produce and manufacture all of these goods. He or she then went on to say, every single item I shop for and buy, from the smallest gadget to the largest item and that use industrial products, are manufactured and produced and assembled in China first or some third world country because of the cheap wage slave salaries. Now, putting aside the wage slave comment or slave wage comment, which is, as far as China is concerned, wrong, the comment went on, most US citizens are buying all of these products from US businesses as their CEOs and major stockholders accumulate millions of dollars and the US voters are struggling to live and pay their bills. It refers back to what I said in the last answer, which is absolutely true. Only the elites are getting rich. Everyone else in America is getting poorer. And this correspondent went on further, stating, it's time for US citizens to network and form cooperative business relationships and build and maintain manufacturing plants and factories and food farms and completely ignore all corporations and all government agencies and all who operate within them. It's time to create a new way, which is simply the old way that our ancestors lived on hundreds of years ago, or 100 years ago. It's time to get back to basics and simple living, this went on, teaching others how to be self-sufficient and not part of this broken system that will never stop doing what it does, making a few people richer and more powerful. It's time for grassroots activists to be the change we want to see. And then it finished with the best line of the comment. Start by consuming less and stop shopping at all multinational corporations, including those on the internet. And finished off with the word peace. Honestly, I couldn't have put this better myself, but I'm not an American. I don't live in America or vote in America. I have no family or friends in America, so it's not my place to comment or give advice here. But I will say this. In the US, this is great advice. You can organize it. It will be well received. There is one problem, though. What you're aiming to achieve is everything that Trump is aiming to achieve. And in that respect, it's commendable. I actually, to a point, approve of what Trump says he wants to do. Most people find that hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. The US needs to protect US citizens and stop worrying about exporting democracy and freedom to people who don't want US-style democracies and freedoms. However, the US has absolutely no manufacturing, logistics, or infrastructural capacity to do this. It has insufficiently trained engineers to build plants and assembly lines, and not enough low-quality workers willing to man the factories, drive the trucks, load the pallets, unless more impoverished immigrants are allowed in. Nor does the US have the automated capacity, and sadly, it will be at least a decade if they started today before it has the factories capable of building the automation for the factories. The idea is fantastic at the moment. Only one country can and is willing to help the US achieve it. But they won't work with China because so many ill-informed Americans, including the vice president, consider China to be some third world country inferior to themselves with cheap wage slave salaries. When the USA can overcome its exceptionalism, rebuild what it lost, it can then start to make America great again. Until America does this, Trump has just found out, and his country is actually dependent on what they thought was a third world country, because that's how they've portrayed China. What a shock to the system that must have been to them. I've heard that Japan is helping out now. Products are being shipped from here to Japan for packing. It will add shipping and handling fees, as well as the 10% that Japan has been tariffed, but it'll still come in under 145%. To be honest, I think it's not China's best way of doing things. Chinese corporations are looking to save their businesses, and that's laudable. But I think the government here needs to help with subsidies and assistance to either retool to other products or divert to new markets. Letting the US get things, even if they are 50% higher in cost, is one way to help here locally, but it's ignoring the global problem that Trump has caused. When the US is faced with gross shortages and massive price hikes, they will need to concede they've made a mistake. It's like having an alcoholic or a drug-addicted family member. You help as much as you can, and you help some more, and finally you say, I can't help you anymore. You stop. Then they get desperate, and they try alternative methods like asking neighbors to help. Eventually they end up stealing, and finally they either die or they reach rock bottom, the point where they need to take some revolutionary action and help themselves. The USA hasn't reached rock bottom yet, and it won't change until it realizes it needs to. But make no mistake about it, the analogy is correct. The USA is a drug-dependent relative sliding rapidly towards rock bottom and attempting to salvage itself by illegal actions that just for the time being feed its addictions. Can the world save America? I honestly don't know the answer to that, because America needs to save itself first. That's all for me today. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, check the subscribe button, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.